Hey everyone, this is Justin Lum, investigative reporter with Fox 10 News here in Phoenix, Arizona, covering the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case. We are specifically focused on Lori Vallow's sentencing, July 31st, 2023. Lori Vallow, the so-called Doomsday mom, will be sentenced for murdering her two children and conspiring in the murder of her husband's first wife, Tammy Daybell. This is a complex case. Lori Vallow was recently convicted in Boise, Idaho, after her triple murder trial. And here with me is Rich Robertson, the private investigator on this case early on, who was very instrumental in assisting Kay Woodcock, who was a grandmother of one of the victims, J.J. Vallow, and also assisting Brandon Boudreaux, another victim in another case regarding another Arizona law enforcement agency. I mean, I spit out these names and these different jurisdictions, Rich. It doesn't get old. It's always a lot. And just for you, as a private investigator, a former journalist, I mean, you talk about this case. This is probably something you will never forget, something you had never experienced, never seen before.
Yeah, this is this is certainly one of those cases, and it had so many twists and turns, and the emotional roller coaster that went with it, and it was unfolding while I was involved in it, and that was the most daunting part of it. I think was what's going on, where does this go, where does it stop, uh, why is this happening? I mean, it was definitely a difficult journey, uh, particularly for the family members that I was trying to assist.
You really talk about a mystery, as you said, a roller coaster back in 2019. To recap for everyone, this involves doomsday beliefs, the end of times, the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's what prosecutors say Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell believed in. At the same time, they were having a clear affair, as they were both married to two different spouses. And we know that Charles Vallow was murdered, shot and killed by Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, who's now dead. He can't speak for himself or defend himself in any case, but she has been indicted and accused of conspiring to kill her husband for a possible motive of life insurance money. We've talked about that with you. And then shortly after, she goes to Rexburg, Idaho, and her kids, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, just disappear. And then Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, suddenly dies. No one knows how, no one knows why. She was 49 years old. And at this time, you're trying to figure out, okay, where are the kids located? Where is Lori located? And then your client, Brandon Boudreaux, who is the ex-nephew-in-law of Lori, is shot at. And we now know, years later, police believe that Alex Cox was a shooter and was put up to this by Lori and Chad. So you have all these moving parts. Just to catch everybody up, what was the most difficult thing for you to grapple with as an investigator? And you're trying to, like, did you believe any of this at the time? What was that train of thought?
Yeah, your explanation of all of this, it just illustrates the complexity of it all. One of the hardest parts was trying to keep all of those parts straight. Who are all the players? How are they related to each other? Uh, what's happening where? There's multiple scenes. I mean, at one point, you can think about it, you had law enforcement agencies in Chandler and Gilbert, Arizona involved. You had law enforcement in Idaho, uh, Utah, Hawaii, and the FBI. I mean, you had multiple agencies looking at various parts of this thing, and just to show you how crazy it all got, and certainly with the shooting of Charles Vallow, uh, that kind of started things. Uh, but it was also the thing that kind of slowed it down a bit too, because initially it was deemed to be a possible self-defense case, and so it wasn't aggressively investigated. Uh, all of the major events in this thing that kind of started things going happened within a few months during 2019, starting in July when Charles was shot. And then by mid-November is when law enforcement in Rexburg finally got involved and started actually asking direct questions of Lori about where her children were. So between July and November is when the drive-by shooting happened. It's when Tammy Daybell died. It's when all these other kind of sub adventures started happening, because there were some things that occurred involving Brandon's wife, along with Alex Cox. They actually charged into somebody's home in Arizona looking for her children. There was she broke into her husband's home outside of Salt Lake at one point, and looking for her children, and she almost got shot. So I mean, there was all these kind of crazy things that were happening, just one after another. Even in Tammy Daybell's case, it wasn't just that she died, which was horrible enough, but she was the target of an attempt, apparently, by Alex Cox a week or two prior to her death. A very similar kind of shooting to what happened at Brandon Boudreaux's home in Arizona. So once you start talking about this stuff, that's where the crazy part of it was.
It's a total rabbit hole, right? It just one thing to the next. You could just keep going and going.
Yeah,
And,
where do you
and
start
it's
the
just
story and everything else?
it's fascinating. I mean, it's been almost 4 years, and you brought up that shooting, that attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell. Somehow, like, investigators Alex missed right in front of her driveway as she got home, and we got to hear that 911 call through the trial as she called, saying that this guy came up in a ski mask and shot at her 10 days before she died. And we now know that she died of asphyxiation, and there was, bruises found on her, appearing that she had been, held down in her home. And obviously her husband, Chad Daybell, is accused of first-degree murder as well as conspiring with Lori in that case. And then you talk about Brandon. He's just driving home in his Tesla, pulling into the driveway, and someone shoots from the back of a Jeep. And you were instrumental in locating that Jeep, the location of it, as well as Gilbert and Rexburg. It was registered to Charles, but we know Charles had already been dead for months. And Tylee drove the Jeep.
Yeah.
Where was Tylee? Yeah. So all of this, yeah, you're right. July to November, such a cloudy, hazy mystery. And you bring up Melanie Polowski, Brandon's ex. They were embroiled in this child custody battle. They have 4 kids together, and he felt he had to protect his kids, especially after the shooting. And it's all documented through Gilbert's police reports and phone calls and things like that she had confronted his friends about where they were. And then also went up to American Fork City, Utah, to Brandon's parents' house and trying to get her kids. And Alex Cox was there once again, seemingly this protector of Lori and Melanie. For you, did you have any obstacles trying to locate them? And did you feel any danger at this time? Everyone in the inner circle, the alleged inner circle, was alive and well, and who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, I didn't feel any personal danger, but was certainly concerned about Brandon and his kids in particular. It was there was a scary time when I discovered Brandon's wife Melanie with Alex Cox. The two of them were taking the furniture out of Melanie's rental home and loading it into the back of a U-Haul, and they then took that U-Haul drove it to Rexburg. At that time, Brandon was in hiding, and he was at his parents' house in Utah. And when that U-Haul left, we had a tail on it, and it was headed straight for Salt Lake. And we didn't know at that point whether or not Alex and Melanie had kind of figured out or assumed or been told or whatever where Brandon and the kids were. So you can imagine the terror that they felt, that they'd been the target of an attempted murder, and now the potential murderer was headed right for them there in Utah. So needless to say, we were scrambling at that point, and we got law enforcement involved. I alerted them as to what vehicles were involved. I provided them pictures, criminal history on Alex, everything. So the American Fork Police were very much responsive to that, and basically put a cordon around the house, and they were watching. And apparently Alex and Melanie didn't know that it was there because they just kept driving. They passed right back by American Fork. They went right through Salt Lake City. They went through Provo, and they drove straight to Rexburg.
Yeah, at that point they had moved and followed Lori and moved into basically right next door to her at these townhomes.
Yeah, we were starting to see everybody kind of coalescing into Rexburg and into that particular complex of townhouses. They were all kind of assembling there.
But did you know why? Did you guys talk about, or was your job just, I've got to surveil them, I've got to just find out, where JJ and Tylee might be, because you're also in communication with Kay Woodcock as well at that time?
Right. Well, the sequence was, I was originally hired by Brandon to find out where was Alex Cox and where was this Jeep and where was his wife, because she'd been missing it for a short time, or for a couple of weeks, and he didn't know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And he was getting all these kind of cryptic messages from her. He was afraid for himself and his kids, needless to say. So that was the initial assignment, was to try to find those three. And it took me a few weeks, but I did find Melanie and Alex together. So that helped. And then once we followed them to Rexburg, the job kind of changed, because we had been looking for adults up to that point. And Brandon had Kay get a hold of me, and she said, "Have you seen the kids?" Because we were watching the townhouse. And he said, "Well, we haven't been looking for the kids at that point. We were looking for adults." So we started looking for the kids and started kind of poking around Rexburg, and went to JJ's school and found out that he had been there briefly and withdrawn. We weren't seeing them. They weren't out playing. We just had no sign of them. So Kay at that point decided she wanted to get the Rexburg police involved, and contacted them and asked them for a welfare check. And that's when everything changed. That's when Lori Vallow lied. And that's when everything kicked up a notch. If you think about what was happening up to that point, Charles Vallow's death in July was not really being investigated, because it was considered to be a probable self-defense case on Alex's part. So it wasn't really being pursued as a murder. The drive-by shooting, while dramatic, wasn't being particularly aggressively investigated by Gilbert, which is why why Brandon hired me, because he wasn't getting the kind of look into this matter that he thought it deserved. And then by this time, Tammy Daybell's shooting, she wasn't even sure if she was a target. She thought it might have been a prank. She thought it might be a paintball gun. So that didn't get taken seriously. And then she dies. And it was very quickly decided that it was natural causes. They had a very quick funeral, no autopsy. So there was no momentum. There was all these kind of weird things happening, but nothing was getting any traction until Lori lied about the whereabouts of these kids. And suddenly everything looks suspicious. And that's when the Rexburg police really jumped on this thing, and they put out the national alert, basically saying endangered on these missing kids, and where are they? And everything kind of blew up from there. That point, it put everything into some context, and everything started looking suspicious. Charles Vallow's death, the drive-by shooting, clearly was suspicious, but wasn't getting anything. And then Tammy Daybell's death. So, and now these kids are missing, and it's all involving the very same people. What are the odds? So that's where it had to build up some momentum before everything blew up.
There had to be a moment that really switched the antenna on for law enforcement.
I think
And it's
that tipping point for everybody, I think, was when Lori lied.
yeah, because hindsight is 2020. We look back at the shooting, what we know in Chandler in that home, and how you know Charles Vallow was shot twice, and I believe the second bullet and the entry and the exit. The autopsy shows that he was laying down, and we now know that it took Alex Cox 45 minutes to call 911, and all of these other red flags, and Lori leaving the scene, coming back, and being so happy and smiley. And at the time, Chandler police only had a few narratives. Tylee, Alex, and Lori saying that Charles had become enraged, right? And this was all self-defense. So you believe that self-defense narrative slowed the investigation down, even though Chandler police will say now that they were always a bit suspicious. But Lori was allowed to, she moved to Rexburg about a little more than a month later, in late August to Rexburg, no problem, no issue. And Alex as well, going along with her. And then she gets caught in a lie saying that JJ's with Melanie Gibb and Gilbert watching a movie, but then also had told Melanie that she sent JJ with Kay because and even I think lied about Kay being sick or something.
Yeah.
There was definitely many different stories, especially with Charles's death too. She had told people he took his own life. So she really unraveled this on her own, and now hence she's convicted. It's wild to think about all of these
Right.
incidents.
Well, and I think that was influential to the jury as well. When that story got told to the jury, and even having her own son on the stand saying that she lied to him about,
Yeah.
And so that kind of stuff is damning, and it was you take these incidents in isolation and it doesn't get things going, but it's once it all kind of, you saw the pattern, and she's trying to cover it up. It's always the cover up, right? And that's what was happening here. It was the cover up.
Kay Woodcock, Larry Woodcock, they really did push for this thing and sounded the alarm, especially on the media front. I mean, there are some cases where, you have kids go missing, and families do come forward and they speak to the media, but it didn't seem as much as Kay and Larry on the national and local front. And you had different agencies in different states, and they didn't care. They would speak via Zoom, via FaceTime to really get the message out that something was wrong. I say that, and at the same time, Brandon was instrumental in really kind of digging and working with Kay behind the scenes, is what and he testified, and you really find out a lot. And obviously, you work directly with him. But if Brandon, God forbid, if he was shot, if he didn't survive that, I mean, what do you think? Did things not turn out the same, or? I know that's a what if scenario, but I've talked to him and said, it's just to imagine that'd be terrible.
It would be terrible, but and the implications of that, you can do a lot of what ifs. I mean, what if Tammy Daybell had also been successfully shot early on? And what if the police had listened to Charles Vallow's pleas before he died? That someone was going to die, and he thought it might be him. And he, those body camera videos of him pleading for help, and saying Lori was dangerous and was going off the deep end, with all this religious stuff. If that had gotten any kind of attention, if there's anything the police could have done at that point, even, not sure that there was enough for them to intervene in a way that would have saved Charles. He foresaw his own death, and he made preparations for it. He changed the beneficiary on his life insurance to Kay. He gave her all of his accounts and passwords and logins and everything, so that if something happened to him, that she would be able to do exactly what she did. She was an willing, this is not something Kay Woodcock wanted to do, certainly, and it was a horrifically difficult journey for her. She was passionate about defending her brother, finding the kids, finding out what happened to the kids, and getting justice now for the kids. But it took a toll on both her and Larry. There were times when they had to just stop, and they were turning down media interviews. They were just holed up. Larry had some health problems as a result of all this, and so it took a tremendous toll on them. And whether or not this sentencing on Monday will give them any peace, I don't know. I've been doing this a long time. People talk about closure. I don't see it. It's just another step, and there will be appeals, and there will be another trial with Chad, and there will be another trial over Charles in Arizona. So this is just one more step in a very, very long process.
Now, was it validating for you personally when we could finally confirm that Lori was also indicted on the attempted murder charge for Brandon? Because that was a question mark for a while. Will they prosecute for that, to say that she conspired? You know, she basically had an alibi in a way where she wasn't in town. She wasn't in Arizona when that shooting happened, but it seemed like there was enough evidence in the probable cause report to put the conspiracy charge on her. It just took a long time. And as you have the Charles Vallow conspiracy murder charge as well.
Right. I mean, it's usually in these kind of cases, you always kind of approach it by asking who would benefit from the death of Brandon Boudreaux.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't directly Lori Vallow, and it wasn't sort of Alex Cox, and yet those are the two who are charged. So that case in particular is going to have to focus on the conspiracy and what communications occurred and all that to make that thing happen. But it's interesting. That's a more difficult case, I think, than the others.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens when she's extradited to Maricopa County, and if she fights it or just you could plead guilty too, and she could continue her sentence in Idaho. We don't know what that exact sentence is. We are waiting to see that, but there's some options here.
Yeah, but there are certainly, and having her plead out to those to avoid any kind of a trial and put everybody through that anguish is an option. Whether she will consent to that option is another thing. And is she competent to even make that decision? That's been an issue going into this trial in Idaho, is her competency, and is that gonna, her sentencing and being transferred to prison, is that going to change her mental health status? Will that affect her ability to participate in her own defense in Arizona? We could wind up in a competency dispute on both those cases that could delay any kind of prosecution on those cases as well. So it would definitely make it shorter and cleaner if she entered into some kind of a plea, or to plead guilty and avoid the trial with some assurance that she gets a concurrent sentence to what she's already serving.
Mm-hmm.
But the only benefit, frankly, to adding on to it is if she somehow gets acquitted or her conviction gets reversed on the Idaho case. There's always that possibility, and so they want to have these other convictions to be able to hold on to her. And if that case falls apart for whatever reason, then at least they would have these other convictions to be able to secure her in custody while all of this gets sorted out. That's why these things take forever. It's a very, very long.
They really do. It's not over quite yet. The sentencing is a big deal, but the appeal process and things like that, and this can get drawn out. And then the cases here in Maricopa County. So the saga on Lori Vallow far from over in reality. And then we still have Chad Daybell's trial, like you said, in April 2024. He faces potential of the death penalty if convicted. We know that. Now, you going back to surveillance you did in Idaho, that was before that late November range when Rexburg police did the welfare check. So I don't know exactly how long you were up there in Rexburg, and if you could tell me just what you noticed. I know you had kind of combed around and gone to JJ school, but did you ever see Lori?
Well, for starters, it wasn't me personally. I retained a local agent out of Pocatello to assist me on that. It's much better to have somebody who knows the turf, knows the people.
Gotcha.
This was ex-law enforcement, so I was coordinating his work. I also had another investigator in Salt Lake City assisting me on that end. So I had a group of investigators working on this, so it was a tag team thing, and I was coordinating it. He was reporting back as to what he was seeing. So yeah, he sat outside that townhouse off and on for a week or 10 days or so, and we were kind of checking things and kind of going around, and he was going around knocking on some doors and asking some questions, and like I said, going to the school to find out if JJ was there. Those kinds of things were going on, and so at one point it discovered that the Jeep that was involved in Brandon's case was there at the townhouse, and so word got back, and the Gilbert police coordinated with the Rexburg police to seize that Jeep. So they took that Jeep into evidence even before the welfare check had occurred on the kids, and interestingly, which has always been kind of curious to me, Alex and Lori never reported that Jeep missing, never reported it stolen. I don't know why.
They never said a thing about the Jeep.
They never said a thing, and it had been snatched up by the police, and they never reported it as being stolen.
I never thought about that.
That was a weird one.
Yeah.
And that was sort of one of the things I think that kind of got the Rexburg police attention. They knew that Lori was and Alex were subjects of interest in the drive-by shooting at that point, and they certainly knew about Charles Vallow's death. So that gave them some impetus to go in and do this welfare check on the kids. So they understood the context of it, and it was I think it helped them ask a few pointed questions, and more importantly, they were asking questions that they already knew the answers to, and so. But there was some things out of it, like when she said that the kids were with Kay. I mean, the police already knew that the kids were not with Kay. She said that the kids were with Melanie Gibb. I don't know that in Chandler. I don't know that if the police knew about that. I had been in contact with Melanie Gibb before that. I talked to Melanie while I was looking for Melanie Boudreaux, and because they were friends. All of them were together in Chad Daybell's little group.
So how did you locate Melanie Gibb? What caused you to say, I need to talk to her about Melanie Boudreaux? I mean, I know you said because they were friends, but
yeah,
before the welfare check.
So I thought, well, if Melanie Boudreaux is avoiding her husband, is missing, maybe her friend knows. Talk to her friends, talk to her neighbors. So that's a very basic kind of investigation. That's what I did. I went to the neighbors around the house where her rental house. I went to her friend, Melanie Gibb. She wasn't hard to find, and knocked on her door, and she didn't really want to talk to me. and it was very clear to me from her terse responses that she knew exactly where everybody was. She denied it verbally that she knew where everybody was, but it was clear to me that she did know, and that turned out to be true. What I didn't know until much later was that Lori Vallow was trying to get Melanie Gibb to lie, and Melanie Gibb, that was just a step too far for Melanie Gibb to lie about the children being with her. But there's audio recording, and at that point, Melanie Gibb had recorded that conversation, and Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were trying to suborn perjury on her part. So they were. It's it was all these kind of things that were developing at the point.
Yeah, we know that she had basically told Gilbert, "Sorry, I was not clear with you guys. They tried to get me to lie." She finally admits it, but with you, when you had talked to her, you could tell that she knew where she had been in contact with everyone, but just didn't want to speak to you about it. So she wasn't willing to disclose the location of anyone, but when it came to them putting her in a bind with police, that's when
Right.
she came forward. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's interesting how these things turned out.
Yep, she was being a friend at first, and then friends don't ask friends to lie to the police.
That's what she said. She literally said that. Good
right.
memory. That is the quote. It's just wow. So yeah, you were definitely getting a lot of intel before even the welfare check. Was there anything suspicious? She didn't give you much information. What was the next step?
Well, again, I had talked to the neighbors at the rental house that where Melanie had been. I mean, I'd gone. Melanie Boudreaux had a rental home, and I'd gone there a couple of times, and just talked to some neighbors, and they hadn't seen her in 10 days or 2 weeks either. And trash can was out and left out, and there was no sign of activity around the house. It looked like somebody had just gone shopping. The kids, her kids, towels were out hanging on the fence by the swimming pool. There was a bike out. There was it just looked like a regular neighborhood, and where somebody had just gone to the grocery store and left. But she hadn't been there for a couple of weeks, according to the neighbors. So all I did was leave my business cards with them and said, hey, if you see her, if she comes back or whatever, please let me know. And that's what happened. Halloween night, I was out trick-or-treating with my grandkids, and I got 2 phone calls from neighbors saying she's back. There's a U-Haul backed up in front of her house, and they're loading furniture into it. And so I ditched my grandkids and headed straight down there and pulled up, and sure as heck, there was the U-Haul, and there was 2 people. And I sat just down the street and observed, and it was pretty clear it was Melanie Boudreaux, and I was pretty sure it was Alex Cox who was with her. And I just watched them loading furniture from the house into that U-Haul. And interestingly, at that point, of course, she did not have the kids with her because they were with her husband, but they didn't load everything into the U-Haul. They loaded some of the kids' bedding and bags of clothing and toys. They didn't put that in the U-Haul. They brought it out of the house, but they put it on the curb and left it there. And when they drove off and left, they left her children's belongings out there on the curb with a cardboard sign on it that said free. She was giving away her kids' stuff. Now we have JJ and Tylee missing, and now Melanie Boudreaux is giving away her children's clothing at the same time she was kind of looking for them. I mean, none of this made a lot of sense to me at that point. Excuse me.
Really confusing. Yeah, really confusing message, or I mean, maybe just you could say on the other side, playing devil's advocate, just getting rid of some stuff. But she was also moving in the process of moving to Rexburg into this townhome, and then, like you said, wanted to see her kids and wanted to get her kids.
Yeah,
Um,
it's certainly hard to know what the explanation was for that, but it wasn't anything else. It wasn't the only things they left out on the curb were the kids' things. So why that was different, I don't know. But I took some pictures of it and got a hold of Brandon and said, "Do you want any of this?" He said, "Yeah, I'd like to have some of the clothes." So I picked up some of the clothes and got it to him.
wow.
Yeah.
And just to, I mean, people always ask this. They want to know more about, how Melanie was allegedly involved. She's never been charged in anything with this case, but she is brought up in police reports because of the communication within this, alleged inner circle, which includes Melanie Gibb, Melanie Polowski, Zulema Pastenes, who was Alex Cox's wife for a short time, and obviously Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell and some other people involved in this group that seem to share the same religious beliefs.
Right.
Um, were you surprised that she did not have to testify? And she was going to be called to the stand, but there were issues, and a lot of people wanted to hear from Lori Vallow's niece.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. You never know what goes on in a trial behind the scenes, and there are lots of different reasons why people are or are not called to testify, and agreements can be made, or there's some concern that somebody's testimony might be impeached in some way. You're not confident what they might say. It might be redundant to testimony that's already come in, and they felt like they already had what they needed. So why take a chance with another witness who might tell a slightly different version and confuse the jury? I mean, there's just all kinds of discussions that occur about witnesses. It isn't just because somebody's listed as a witness, everybody testifies.
Her
So
husband testified, right? And then, but she had
very
said
emotional.
that she had watched Brandon's testimony, and so that basically disqualified her when you're told not to watch other witnesses' testimonies. So interesting. She did not have to testify against her aunt, who we know that she cared about a lot and looked up to. Just this has been a bizarre story, but Rich, I thank you for your time, and this we could just keep going and going. Yeah, really, this rabbit hole.
There's
Um,
so many different things. Yeah, yeah.
I I just know that this has been a long journey. And then yeah, it must be very surreal for you to experience everything you did, not knowing much at all at the time, and just probably asking yourself, what the heck is
Right.
going on? And then now to know everything we do now and the ultimately the tragedy of it all. It's
Yeah,
how did it come to this? It's pretty surreal.
it is. It's it's such a sad story in so many different ways, and these. And I think one of the things that has captured people's attention is all of these people kind of look like the all-American families, and Lori Vallow was beloved in her church. I talked to some of the kids who were in their Sunday schools. They were just aghast. They had friends. They were living charmed life. They were beautiful families, and um, and somewhere this took a turn, and the why is always the story, and I don't know that we'll ever really understand the why in all this.
It's tough to. All right, Rich, thank you so much.